Episode 16, The Spring Confrontation. Sabrina hurried through the gathering crowd in town square, the fragmented lens cool against her palm. Through its crystalline surface, she watched in horror as spring magic pulsed from artifacts arranged in a disturbingly familiar pattern. Each piece glowed with a sickly green resonance that matched the collector's corrupted energy from the maze. "It's worse than we thought," she murmured to Noah as he consulted his handheld scanner. The device's screen flickered with rapidly changing numbers, its warning tone barely audible above the excited chatter of spectators. "Energy readings are off the charts," Noah confirmed, frowning at the display. "Whatever they're planning, it's already building to dangerous levels." At the center of the square, Ivy Larkspur commanded attention in an elegant green dress that seemed to shimmer with its own light. She raised her hands with practiced grace, and the first wave of magic rippled outward. Dormant flower beds erupted into brilliant bloom, their petals almost fluorescent in their intensity. Carved pumpkins and cobweb-draped lampposts transformed before their eyes, vines and flowers replacing Halloween decorations in a cascade of spring growth. The crowd gasped in delight, but through the lens, Sabrina saw the truth. Each transformation tore at the fabric of Hallowville's natural magic, forcing spring energy through channels meant to maintain seasonal balance. The violence of it made her stomach turn. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Ivy's voice carried across the square. "This is the future of Hallowville, perpetual renewal, endless growth, unbound by artificial limitations." The special seedling's energy flared in Sabrina's mind, its warning sharp and urgent. Through their connection, she perceived the network of ley lines beneath the square, ancient channels of power now straining under unnatural pressure. Each pulse of spring magic created new stress points, threatening to shatter the very foundation of Hallowville's magical infrastructure. "Noah," she whispered, the ley lines dash. "I see it." He adjusted his scanner, jaw tight. The resonance patterns match the Veil records exactly. They're using the same technique that brought down their defenses. Mayor Grange pushed through the crowd, her usual composure slipping. "Ms. Larkspur, this demonstration was not properly authorized. You need to dash." "Mayor Grange," Ivy interrupted smoothly, "surely you can see how the people are responding? This is what Hallowville wants, what it needs." Sabrina lifted the lens, watching in dismay as subtle threads of magic wove through the crowd from strategically placed faction members. Their enchanted tokens pulsed with compulsion magic, swaying perception and dampening concern. Even the mayor seemed to falter, her objections dying on her lips as the influence took hold. The artifact's resonance grew stronger, their corrupted energy interfacing with Hallowville's protective wards. Through the lens, Sabrina watched the ancient defenses begin to fray, centuries of carefully crafted protection unraveling strand by strand. Noah's scanner beeped frantically, confirming what she already knew. This was no mere demonstration, but a calculated assault on everything that kept their town stable. "The wards are failing," Noah reported, his voice tight. "At this rate, they'll breach the outer barriers within minutes." The special seedling's energy surged again, showing Sabrina how the damage spread through the magical network. Each failing ward created a new weak point, each transformation further destabilized the balance. The pattern was expanding outward in precise circles, just as the collector had planned. Ivy's voice rose again, smooth as honey but laced with steel. "Feel the power of true spring magic, unfettered by outdated traditions. This is only the beginning of what we can achieve together." Through the lens, Sabrina watched the artifacts pulse in perfect synchronization, their corrupted energy building towards something catastrophic. The special seedling's warning reached a fever pitch, and she knew they were running out of time to stop what was coming. Noah's scanner displayed a familiar pattern, one they'd seen in the Veil's records just before everything collapsed. "Sabrina, the resonance frequency, it's reaching critical levels." The crowd continued to sway under the token's influence, blind to the destruction building beneath the beautiful display. Mayor Grange stood frozen, caught between duty and enchantment as spring magic continued to overwhelm Halloween's carefully maintained balance. Sabrina felt Quill's essence ripple through nearby plants, fighting against the corruption. But even its expanded influence struggled against the precisely calculated assault. The artifact's power grew stronger with each passing moment, their resonance threatening to shatter everything she'd sworn to protect. Sabrina spotted her magic students near the edge of the crowd, their faces tight with concern as they attempted subtle counter-charms. Jenny, her most advanced student, had already identified 3 of the faction's influence tokens and was working to neutralize them. But for each token they addressed, 2 more seemed to appear. Through the fragmented lens, Sabrina watched in dismay as carefully positioned faction members intercepted her students' efforts. The opposition wasn't random, they had detailed knowledge of who might resist the spring surge. Mrs. Chen, who taught protective wards at the community center, found herself hemmed in by chattering supporters. Old Mr. Peterson, keeper of Halloween traditions, was skillfully distracted by questions about his garden. They mapped out everyone who might stop them, Sabrina muttered, noting the precise positioning. This isn't just preparation, it's tactical. A sharp pain lanced through her temples as Quill's special seedling broadcast urgent distress. She turned the lens toward the park, where the tree of seasons writhed in visible agony. Its branches twisted and contorted, autumn leaves withering and spring buds bursting in chaotic cycles. The protective network of seedlings pulsed desperately, trying to maintain barriers against the surge of corrupted spring magic. "Your attention, please." Ivy's voice cut through the square's growing chaos. She gestured gracefully, and an elaborate ritual circle blazed to life around her. Through the lens, Sabrina saw how it connected directly to the destabilized ley lines beneath the square. "Today, we free Hallowville from the chains of stagnant tradition. No more will we be bound by Halloween's outdated influence." The ritual's true nature revealed itself through the lens, not a simple demonstration, but a corrupted working that bore the collector's signature. Each symbol had been twisted just enough to redirect the natural flow of power, forcing spring magic through channels meant for balance. The ley lines buckled under the pressure, magical fractures spreading like cracks through ice. Noah's scanner whirred frantically as he documented the ritual's structure. "Look at these resonance patterns," he said, showing her the screen. "They're identical to the collector's work in the maze. The factions being used, they have no idea what they're really channeling." But the proof didn't matter now. The crowd swayed under the token's influence, enchanted by the display of spring magic. Even those who noticed the wrongness seemed unable to look directly at it, their concerns sliding away like water off glass. Mayor Grange stood with a slightly vacant smile, nodding along as Ivy spoke of progress and renewal. The special seedling's warning reached fever pitch as the ritual intensified. Through its connection, Sabrina perceived the true purpose behind the chaos. Each surge of spring magic created precise weak points in Hallowville's defensive wards. The pattern wasn't random, it formed a complex network of vulnerabilities, each one carefully positioned to compromise the town's magical infrastructure. The demonstration is just cover, Sabrina realized, watching through the lens as another ley line cracked under the strain. "They're systematically dismantling our defenses." Her students had regrouped, attempting to coordinate their efforts, but the faction's interference was too well planned. Jenny managed to disrupt one of the influence tokens, only to have 3 more activate nearby. The other students found their magic redirected or absorbed by strategically placed spring-enhanced crystals. The square's magical stability deteriorated rapidly. Through the lens, Sabrina watched helplessly as fracture lines spread through the magical infrastructure, the same pattern they'd seen in the Veil's records. Ley lines twisted and warped, their natural flow disrupted by the corrupted ritual. The very foundation of Hallowville's magical balance was being rewritten, one surge at a time. Noah's scanner captured everything, documenting the collector's influence in each aspect of the ritual. The evidence was clear, from the modified symbols to the precise positioning of artifacts, every element bore their signature. But the growing magical chaos made it impossible to break through the crowd's enchantment. Even those who might normally listen were lost in the spectacle of Ivy's performance. The special seedling's energy fluctuated wildly as it fought to maintain its protective network. Through their connection, Sabrina felt its struggle to counter each new vulnerability the ritual created. But the pattern of weaknesses continued to spread, preparing Hallowville's defenses for something far worse than this display. Ivy raised her hands again, channeling another surge of spring magic through the corrupted ritual circle. Feel how naturally this power flows. Why should we resist what comes so easily? But through the lens, Sabrina saw the truth: nothing about this was natural. The ritual forced power through Hallowville's magical channels like poison through veins, creating precise points of failure in their protective wards. Each moment brought them closer to the catastrophic collapse they'd seen in the Vale's records. Sabrina gripped Noah's arm as they pushed through the mesmerized crowd. The fragmented lens revealed dark tendrils of corrupted magic wrapping around each person they passed, like shadowy puppet strings. But it was the sight of Ivy that made her breath catch. The woman stood wreathed in a flickering aura of darkness that pulsed strongest around the artifacts arranged in her ritual circle. "Ivy, stop!" Sabrina called out. "This isn't what you think it is." For just a moment, Ivy's confident smile faltered. Through the lens, Sabrina watched the dark aura surrounding her flutter and thin. Beneath it, Ivy's natural spring magic shimmered like morning dew, pure and bright, but struggling against the corruption that sought to contain it. "You don't understand what we're trying to achieve," Ivy said, but uncertainty threaded through her voice. "Halloween magic has held this town back for too long. We need to embrace change." Noah stepped forward, holding up his scanner's display. "Look at these readings. The ley lines are becoming dangerously unstable. This isn't natural growth, it's forcing change too quickly." Ivy's eyes fixed on the scanner's screen, recognition flickering across her face. Sabrina saw her hands twitch as she studied the erratic patterns. "These energy signatures, they're all wrong. Spring magic should flow like water, not..." She trailed off, frowning at the jagged spikes on the display. The special seedling near Sabrina's feet stretched toward Ivy, its leaves trembling. Through their connection, emotions that weren't her own washed over Sabrina: Ivy's deep love for spring magic, her frustration at feeling constrained by Halloween traditions, and underneath it all, a gnawing fear that her beloved season would always be secondary in Hallowville. "Your research was about natural magical evolution," Sabrina said softly, understanding flowing through her. "You wanted to help spring magic find its place here." "Yes. Exactly." Ivy's face lit up. "We shouldn't have to dash." Her hand brushed against one of the artifacts in her circle, and Sabrina watched through the lens as darkness flooded back through her magical signature. The artifact pulsed with the collector's energy, like an anchor dragging Ivy back into shadow. "We shouldn't have to ask permission to grow stronger." Sabrina pulled the veiled journal from her bag, its pages falling open to the warnings she'd marked. "This has happened before, Ivy. Another magical hub tried forcing seasonal change. Look at their records, see how similar their energy patterns were to what's happening now?" Ivy's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. "These calculations. I've never seen these before." The collector said all previous attempts failed because they were too cautious, but this shows. She looked up sharply. "Why didn't they tell me about this research?" "Because they're using you," Noah said firmly. "They've been manipulating information, hiding anything that doesn't fit their narrative." "No," Ivy shook her head, but her voice wavered. "They understand what spring magic needs. They showed me how to amplify it, how to." She reached for another artifact, and darkness swirled around her again. Sabrina watched through the lens as Ivy's natural magic fought against the corruption. Each time she began to question, the artifact's influence would surge, dragging her back. The collector had woven their web carefully, positioning each corrupted item to maintain control over their unwitting ally. "Your real spring magic is beautiful," Sabrina said, gesturing at the lens. "But these artifacts are twisting it into something else. Something that could tear Hallowville apart." "Let me see," Ivy whispered, reaching for the lens with trembling fingers. As she peered through it, her face paled. This isn't what I wanted. The patterns are all wrong. Spring magic should nurture, not." She stared at her ritual circle in horror. "What have I been doing?" The special seedling at Sabrina's feet suddenly pulsed with an ethereal glow, sending up spirals of magical energy that perfectly blended autumn's amber warmth with spring's verdant vitality. Through the fragmented lens, Sabrina watched the harmonious display create intricate patterns in the air, like a dance between seasons, neither dominating, both enhanced by their partnership. Ivy's hands froze mid-gesture as she stared at the seedling. The corruption around her magical signature wavered, and for a moment, her natural spring magic reached toward the balanced energy like a flower seeking sunlight. "That's beautiful," Ivy whispered, her voice tinged with wonder. "I've never seen the magics mesh so perfectly." Noah checked his scanner, the device chirping as it registered the changes. "The artifact's influence drops whenever you question them, Ivy. Look at these readings, your own magic fights back every time you see through their deception." Sabrina watched Ivy's aura fluctuate through the lens. The woman's innate spring magic was powerful, pure, but the dark tendrils from the artifacts kept trying to drag it back into shadow. Still, Ivy's resistance proved she wasn't completely under the collector's control. "The artifacts." Ivy wrapped her arms around herself, frowning. "Sometimes they feel wrong. Last week, I tried using one to encourage growth in the park, but the plants it touched turned black. I told myself it was necessary, that evolution requires sacrifice." She straightened her shoulders. "Hallowville needs to change. The old ways are holding us back." The special seedling stretched higher, its leaves spreading to cast shifting shadows that revealed the truth of the magical imbalance. Through their connection, Sabrina felt its urgency to show how the forced changes were damaging spring magic itself. The lens revealed withering patterns in the ley lines, places where spring's natural flow had been twisted into sharp, unnatural angles. "Look what's happening to your season's magic," Sabrina said softly, holding out the lens. "This isn't evolution, it's corruption." Ivy's face paled as she peered through the lens again. "No, that's not, it can't be." But Sabrina saw the horror in her eyes as she recognized the damage. Then one of the artifacts pulsed, and darkness swept back over Ivy's magical signature. "Sometimes things must be broken to be rebuilt stronger." Sabrina reached for the seedling, channeling its perfectly balanced energy. With careful control, she created a small display of magical harmony, autumn leaves sprouting spring flowers, each enhancement making the other more vibrant. Spring magic doesn't need to be forced. When it's allowed to flow naturally with other seasons, it becomes even more powerful. Through the lens, Sabrina watched Ivy's magical signature begin to clear as she studied the display. The woman reached out tentatively, her own spring magic responding to the balanced energy. But then she jerked back, clutching one of the artifacts. "I've worked too hard," Ivy said, though her voice shook. "Given too much. If I stop now." She squared her shoulders, raising her hands to continue the ritual. "Hallowville will thank us when they see what spring magic can truly do." The artifact's corruption surged through Ivy's magical signature, stronger than before. But through the lens, Sabrina could see the cracks in its hold, places where doubt had created weak points in the collector's influence. Ivy's choice to continue had strengthened their control, but it wasn't absolute. "Please," Sabrina tried one last time, but Ivy had already turned back to her ritual circle, her movements mechanical as she began the next sequence. The special seedling drooped, its leaves trembling as the corrupted magic began to build once more. Noah's scanner beeped urgently as the ley line's instability increased. Sabrina, the energy patterns are becoming critical. We need to dash. The artifacts in Ivy's circle began to pulse with sickly green light, drowning out the seedling's harmonious glow. Through the lens, Sabrina watched darkness spread through the magical currents like ink in water, and Ivy's natural spring magic dimmed beneath its weight. Sabrina's heart raced as she watched the magical energies collide through the fragmented lens. Corrupted spring magic, sickly green and sharp-edged, slammed against the natural amber flow of Halloween power. The collision created violent spirals of energy that made her stomach lurch. Each new wave threatened to rip apart the delicate magical fabric that held Hallowville together. The readings are off the charts. Noah's voice barely carried over the growing magical chaos. His scanner sparked and fizzed, the display flickering wildly. The surge is creating some kind of chain reaction. Before Sabrina could respond, the special seedling erupted with brilliant light. Through their connection, she felt its urgent call, a familiar presence that tugged at her heart. Other seedlings throughout the square began to glow and drift toward it, drawn like moths to flame. The luminous strands of plant matter twisted and merged, taking on a shape that made her breath catch, the distinct outline of pointed quills and a rounded form she knew all too well. "That's impossible," she whispered, but the lens showed her otherwise. The forming entity pulsed with perfectly balanced seasonal energy, autumn and spring magic flowing through its plant-based structure in harmonious waves. As it grew more defined, a protective barrier of pure magical energy spread outward, enveloping Sabrina in its warm glow. Screams erupted from the crowd as more magical feedback loops formed. But through her strengthening connection with the evolving seedling, Sabrina's awareness suddenly expanded. The lens enhanced her perception, revealing Hallowville's entire magical network like a glowing web. She could see exactly where the surge threatened to snap crucial ley line junctions, bright points of stress that would cascade into magical disaster if they broke. "Noah, the junction points." She pointed to where the worst damage was forming. "We need to dash." The partially formed entity, she couldn't quite think of it as Quill yet, pulsed with understanding. Through their bond, it showed her exactly how to weave her magic, creating stabilizing patterns that could thread through the chaos. Sabrina followed its guidance, her hands moving in precise gestures as she channeled power through the lens. With each successful intervention, the entity's form grew more distinct. Leaves and vines twisted into familiar shapes, the curve of a spine, the alert tilt of tiny ears. Noah's scanner whirred as it tracked the changes. "The entity is acting as some kind of magical processor," he reported, adjusting dials. "It's absorbing the corrupted energy, filtering it through its plant structure, and releasing it back into the system in a purified state." Sabrina felt the truth of his words through her connection with the forming creature. Like a natural filter, it drew in the twisted magic, separated spring from autumn influence, and wove them back together in perfect balance. The lens showed her how each wave of purified energy strengthened Hallowville's magical foundation instead of eroding it. Ivy staggered back from her ritual circle, the artifacts in her hands dimming as their corruption was stripped away. "What's happening to the power?" she demanded, but her voice held more fear than anger now. The entity's protective barrier expanded, its glow reaching toward Ivy like an offering. Through the lens, Sabrina watched as tendrils of pure spring magic, free from the artifact's taint, reached back in response. The forming creature's leaves rustled with satisfaction as natural balance began to restore itself, one strand of magic at a time. Sabrina felt the merging seedlings wrap around her like a living cocoon, their energy pulsing in perfect sync with her racing thoughts. Through the fragmented lens, she watched in amazement as they formed an intricate network of glowing strands, mirroring the complex root system she'd seen beneath the Tree of Seasons. Each tendril responded to her slightest mental nudge, adjusting and shifting with impossible precision. "The network," she breathed, understanding flooding through her. "It's adapting just like the tree does when threatened." The lens revealed layers of magical defense she'd never noticed before, patterns of energy that flexed and flowed like a living thing. As she channeled more power through their connection, the forming entity flickered between states. One moment it was solid enough to cast shadows, the next translucent as morning mist. Each time they successfully redirected a surge of corrupted magic, its shape gained definition, the curve of a spine here, the suggestion of quills there. But Sabrina felt each success drain her own strength, her legs growing heavy as she worked. The entity suddenly extended tendrils of energy through the ground, reaching for Hallowville's root system. Through their link, Sabrina sensed its intention, creating temporary anchors to stabilize the town's magical field. She watched through the lens as each connection formed, glowing points of balanced energy spreading out like stars across a map. The effort made her hands shake, and she felt the entity's own energy fluctuate dangerously. "The anchors are holding," Noah called out, checking his scanner. "But something's wrong with the readings near the tree dash." Before he could finish, a massive surge of corrupted magic slammed toward the Tree of Seasons. Sabrina's heart seized as the lens showed her the potential devastation. If that much power hit the tree unfiltered, it could shatter the very foundation of Hallowville's magic. The entity reacted instantly, releasing a burst of pure, balanced energy that met the surge head-on. Through the lens, Sabrina watched autumn and spring magic weave together in perfect harmony, creating a shield that diffused the corrupted power. But the cost was immediate and severe. The entity's form destabilized, its carefully gained definition dissolving into scattered motes of light. "No!" Sabrina reached out both physically and magically, trying to hold it together. Her own energy reserves were dangerously low, each spell feeling like it was being pulled from her very marrow. Still, she couldn't stop. Together, they fought to contain the chaos, redirecting surges and reinforcing failing ley lines until the magical feedback began to stabilize. When the last echo of corrupted magic finally faded, Sabrina's knees buckled. She caught herself against a nearby tree, breathing heavily as spots danced in her vision. The entity, she couldn't help thinking of it as Quill now, even in this strange new form, drifted closer. Its plant-based structure had permanently changed, no longer just a seedling but not quite the familiar shape she remembered. Through the lens, she could see how the emergency transformation had altered its very essence. Glowing leaves and vines now formed a semi-solid shape that pulsed with both autumn and spring magic. Where Quill's physical form had once been solid and warm, this new version shifted between states like light through water. But the connection between them felt stronger than ever, forged anew in the crucible of necessity. Sabrina pressed a hand to her temple, fighting off a wave of dizziness. Around them, the magical anchors still held, though she could feel them weakening without active maintenance. The lens showed her how this new form of Quill had become a living conduit for balanced magic, but the cost of that evolution was etched in every unstable flicker of its being. Noah appeared at her side, offering support as she swayed. "The readings are finally normalizing," he said quietly, "but you both look." He trailed off, concern evident in his voice. Sabrina nodded weakly, understanding his unspoken worry. She and this new version of Quill had prevented disaster, but they'd pushed themselves to their absolute limits. Through their connection, she felt Quill's exhaustion mirror her own, a bone-deep weariness that came from expending too much magical energy too quickly. The entity drifted closer, its form rippling like leaves in a gentle breeze. Through the lens, Sabrina watched the intricate patterns of magic flowing through its structure, autumn and spring power perfectly balanced, but forever changed by what they'd endured together. This wasn't a full restoration of her old friend, but something new born of desperate circumstances and shared sacrifice.